Well, I'm joined now by three members of the Parliamentary Press Gallery. Susan Delacourt is a columnist for the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for La Presse. And John Ivison is a columnist for the National Post and Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Post Media. Here we go, maybe again. Susan, are we heading, we're heading down the tracks here towards a possible snap election over the Conservative motion to create this special committee to probe the WE controversy. Are we really going to have an election over this?
You know, I think we've all been around long enough to know that elections happen over very stupid things sometimes. So it isn't what provokes it. I am still betting heavily that there will be some arrangement between the NDP and the Liberals, mainly because I think the NDP does not want an election. I listened to Mr. Singh very carefully. It's hard to parse his words. I think right now everybody is saying if there's an election, it's somebody else's fault, which is usually how we fall into elections, by the way. Mm-hmm. But my bet right now, I don't want to be held to this tomorrow. My bet is that we're not.
Okay, Joël-Denis, what about you? Do you think we're headed to the polls? And what do you think of the Liberal strategy here?
It tells me one thing, Peter, is the fact that the Liberals want an election, would like to have an election, because they're looking around and, like in New Brunswick, for example, there was a minority government that was re-elected with a majority recently. And there's also provincial elections in British Columbia, and the NDP is in good position to win a majority again. So the Liberals know that governments that govern in this pandemic were rewarded. So I guess they feel that the time might be good for them too. But as Susan mentioned, I think the NDP wants to put the brake on this kind of stuff, and we'll see tomorrow whether it is the final decision of the NDP.
John, what are your thoughts here? Do you think we're headed for an election? And is this about, as Joël-Denis says, do you think the Liberals trying to strike at an electoral opportunity here? Or is there something they're trying to block from coming out of the WE investigation?
Well, I had prematurely, I think, thought that the WE scandal was over when Bill Morneau left, but they do seem very determined not to let the opposition parties see all these documents, so who knows what might be there. I do think that they would like to have an election now. I mean, I saw a poll finding in one of our polls last week which suggested 1/3 of respondents would have been destitute without government support. You know, in that circumstance, you've got 1/3 of those people who are very grateful to the government for the way they've handled COVID. So I think it would be odds on the Liberals would win their majority back. But I don't think there'll be an election. I do think that the NDP, it's in their interests not to have an election, partly because they've been so cosy with the Liberals. And I do think that we've already seen signs from MPs like Charlie Angus saying we could have a committee that did not necessarily look at go looking for the documents on Margaret Trudeau and Sacha Trudeau, which seems to be the main objection of the Prime Minister at the moment.
Susan, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think this is about, because we've seen the Liberals do everything they could to delay, the resurgence of a WE investigation at the Ethics Committee, at the Finance Committee, filibustering both of those committees for the last number of weeks here. How much of this is about what else there might be to learn about the WE controversy, or how much is just about looking for an opportunity to win a majority government?
You know, back in the summer, I talked to somebody in the Prime Minister's office, or close to the Prime Minister, let's say, and I said, when they prorogued Parliament, I said, that seems like a dumb idea to me, because you're just giving Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives a chance every day to have a news conference on what they're finding out about WE. And the Liberals said to me, look, I want them to have a press conference every day about WE. If we are headed into a second wave, the Conservatives standing talking about WE charity and corruption in government makes them look really out of tune with the Canadian public. And I took them at their word for it. My view from talking to them is they feel that they are past it too. And it wasn't so much that we energized opponents of the Liberals. it made Liberals themselves nervous, and I think that's what they're trying to avoid. Is right now they had their own people were very kind of happy with how they were dealing with the pandemic, the fact that they were helping people, as John said, and we made Liberals nervous, and I don't think they want to resurrect that again.
I mean, there's Joël-Denis. Let's stay with this topic for the few minutes we have left here. You know, the Liberals are making the case that, look, we don't want to go to an election here. There's a pandemic to take care of, you know, and to help people through. But if we do end up in an election, who's going to bear the blame for it?
That's a good question, and I would say that all the parties will bear some responsibility, but ultimately the blame might end up in the Liberals because they decided to make this vote a vote of confidence on the creation of a committee. So, and I would say that the leader of the government in the House of Commons today, Pablo Rodriguez, did not plead his case very well to convince people. There's a lot of skepticism about why the Liberals feel this is necessary to have a confidence motion, a confidence vote on a motion that would create a committee. So, but in this case, I think the blame game will last for a few weeks if there is an election, as opposed to a regular time when the blame games maybe last 24 hours. This time, people will hold a grudge for a long time, I think, against those who provoked the election.
John, do you think that's a big factor? I mean, given the fact that we have an election campaign underway in Saskatchewan, there's one in British Columbia, we had one in New Brunswick. Are people past the notion that now those largely fixed election dates are in a couple of cases, but are people past that, or do you think there is blame to be assigned here, and who would get it if we go into an election tomorrow?
Well, I think that at the end of the day, the people will vote according to how they perceive the government handled the COVID crisis. That's what's on people's minds. That's what all the polls suggest. But having said that, you know, the government is clearly overreacting here. I mean, to have an election over the formation of a committee that is designed to hold the government to account is hardly in keeping with the sort of Olympian heights of accountability that they promised, particularly in 2015. I went back and looked at the 2015 platform today, and it reads like satire. I mean, you've got electoral reform, you've got bolstering the access to information legislation, you've got saying we will never prorogue or use omnibus bills, and we will strengthen committees. Now, in every one of those cases, the reality has fallen far short of what the Liberals promised. And I do think that this gives the Conservatives ammunition. If we do go to an election, this is something that the opposition parties can beat the government with.
All right. Well, look, the next 24 hours are going to be interesting, and we'll have a chance to talk again. If we're in an election campaign, we might have a chance to talk a lot more often than we do now. But thank you all for your time tonight. We'll talk again.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.